This year's Omar Khayyam Day here at OU. I'm just going to make a few introductory remarks and introduce our first speaker. We actually have two speakers with us today, as you know from the flyer, Dr. Fatemeh Keshavarz from University of Maryland and Dr. Farzaneh Milani from University of Virginia. I'll introduce Dr. Keshavarz, and then after lunch, we've got a full day of events planned for you. So after lunch, my colleague Alexander Jabbari will introduce Professor Milani. And please remember, we do have a whole roster of events today, including a calligraphy workshop and a poetry recitation. So please follow along on the flyer for the schedule of events. So we also have lunch, and we have lots of giveaways and goodies and swag. So that's the word for the day I learned. My students taught me last week. T-shirts, mugs, and pens and things. So be sure to get some of swag outside. Let me first begin by thanking everyone who helped to make this event happen. Everything we do here at the Farzaneh Center is a collaborative process. So a lot of people contributed. First of all, I'd actually like to thank our students. It was actually through the initiative of OU undergraduate students that Khayyam Day at OU became an event. I guess it was 2 years ago in 2016. And so I think a lot of you were probably here when we received the gift of the Khayyam statue outside. And it was right around that time when, through student initiative, some undergraduate students said, let's turn this into a Khayyam Day at OU event. And we thought that was great, a way of setting aside a day early in the spring when the weather's good, like today, to celebrate the legacy of Omar Khayyam and the legacy of Persian literature. And the statue and the students really made that happen. So be sure to get your picture taken with the statue. That's also become sort of a tradition as well. So what has now become an annual event really began with the initiative of our students. And I'd like to definitely thank them. We have the Iranian Student Association, the Iranian Cultural Association. We have the student editorial collective of our undergraduate Iranian Studies journal, Danesh, which is outside. Hopefully you take a look at the journal as well. All of our students have kind of really worked together to make this happen. And thanks to all of them. I'd also like to thank Mohammed and Jalal Farzaneh for everything they've done to support OU and Iranian Studies at OU. Over the past 8 years, and this is actually our 8-year anniversary, we've been able to build an Iranian Studies program here in Oklahoma. And if you've seen the 8-year report, there's a brochure that we just produced. Hopefully you can have a chance to take a look at that, because I think it's fair to say that we've come a long way in 8 years. And I think we've made our presence felt in the field of Iranian Studies, and I think we have a reputation of being an innovative and probably the fastest growing Iranian Studies program in the country. So I think that's something we can all be proud of, and it's through the generosity of the Farzanehs that that's been possible. So thank you, Mohammed and Jalal, and your whole family. I also want to thank my colleagues in the Iranian Studies program. Marjan Seyrafipour, who is our Director of Outreach Programs, is responsible for putting together so many of our events, including this one. And organizing something like this is a lot of stuff to keep track of. So thank you, Marjan, for running a tight ship and keeping everything on schedule. As well as our graduate interns and student interns that we have. Sarah, Nilufar, Alexandria, and Caleb. I think they're all here. I might be missing a name or two. But thanks to all of you for all that you've done for us and hoping to put this program together. And hopefully this will make it to YouTube, so through our social media intern that we also have. I also want to thank Alexander Jabbari and Manata Hashemi for helping to organize this event. I was actually away in the fall semester when we were beginning to plan this event, and we started planning it all the way back in October. And it was Alexander and Manata who really led the effort to reach out to our visitors and begin making the plans for today. And speaking of our visitors, let me introduce our first speaker, Dr. Fatemeh Keshavarz. As I mentioned, one of the goals of our annual Khayyam Day is to celebrate the heritage and legacy of Persian literature and to explore how that heritage reflects universal themes and values. A heritage that might be considered part of a shared culture of humanism, you can think of that term. a tradition that transcends narrow local, national, religious, or even civilizational boundaries. Dr. Fatemeh Keshavarz is well suited to help us think about the importance of Chayyam in this way. Since 2012, Professor Keshavarz has held the Roshan Institute Chair in Persian Studies at the University of Maryland. She is also the director of the University of Maryland's Roshan Institute for Persian Studies, which I think was founded in 2007.
That's great.
So a few years older than our program, but we're catching up. We're trying to catch up. Prior to her work at Maryland, she was professor in the Department of Asian and Near Eastern Languages and Literatures at Washington University in St. Louis. She's the author of award-winning books, including Reading Mystical Lyric, The Case of Jalaluddin Rumi, Recite in the Name of the Red Rose, Poetic Sacred Making in 20th Century Iran. Probably, I don't know if it's your most well-read or most commonly read book, but Jasmine and Stars, which everyone seems to have read, about reading more than Lolita in Tehran, which I recommend to you. And her most recent book, Lyrics of Life, Sadi on Love, Cosmopolitanism, and the Care of the Self. She's also published numerous journal articles in the field of Persian literature, both in the classical and modern periods. And I could go on, but let me just add one more thing, that she's especially qualified to discuss the legacy of Chayyam with us today, because not only is she a scholar of Persian poetry, but she's a poet. And she's also published poetry herself, at least one volume of verse in Persian verse. So she is both a poet and a scholar. And we are very happy that she's here with us today. Please join me in welcoming Professor Fatemeh Keshavarz.
Thank you so much, Ashijan, for that gracious introduction. It's an absolute pleasure to be here. It's wonderful to see all your young faces and all the excitement and enthusiasm that is very well organized and channeled and taught and directed. And if you bring these two together, then you will have a wonderful center, and I think you do. And I agree with you. My heartfelt thanks are to the Farzani brothers and the Farzani family also for making this possible, because the more we learn about the humanities now and the challenges that we face, it tells us that we have to build places like this. We have to build a stronghold that can last, this particular conversations about how important the humanities is until it settles down and it becomes clear that indeed it is. I know I'm not planning to talk for more than 45 minutes, but whoever is timing me, if it's about like 10 minutes before my 45-minute ends, if you just signal, I would appreciate that. I will also have my watch here. Okay, so I'm going to do a combination of reading some things and also speaking. And hopefully we'll have about at least 15 minutes for you to be able to ask, comment, make suggestions, respond, whatever it is that is on your mind. So I have called what I'm doing today, Long After We're Gone, The World Will Still Be. Chayyam's notion of the world writ large. Now I'm going to, of course, as I started writing this, I realized that that's a book. It's not an article. So I'll try to address this as best as I can. And I also found out, for reasons that I will explain to you, that it is very important to learn about his science in order to understand his poetic legacy, and I'm going to address that. Now this year's May 18, it marks the 970th birthday of Omar Khayyam, the mathematician, astronomer, and poet who has raised more questions than any bright mind can answer. Khayyam's powerful intellectual presence has awakened debates that often verged on controversy, even in the 19th century England, and maybe I should say particularly in the 19th century England, when the first translations of Omar Khayyam and Fitzgerald got published. By the way, I see some people might want to come in, so if you might want to just... Today, I will suggest that Khayyam's search for knowledge, free thinking, and encouraging human agency are all rooted in a powerful and far-reaching humanistic tradition which we refer to as classical Persian poetry and culture. For far too long, we have treated this tradition as if it was an exquisite art object, to be placed in a kind of a museum of distant memories. In reality, the Persian poetic discourse served the Persian-speaking societies which were spread in many parts of the world in a fashion similar to what we have today as digital networks. Works such as the Ghazals of Sa'di and Rumi and the quatrains of Omar Khayyam traveled through the cultural arteries of these societies. For example, as the Rah Abrisham, the Silk Road, took goods, it also took poetry. It also took this culture with it. And arteries of the society spreading a message of learning, listening, and often tolerance. Now, please, I would like to underline this. I do not really want to depict a picture of these societies as being totally flawless. They were all tolerating everything. Everything was rosy and perfect. But this literature and culture, as we see in the works of Khayyam, Sa'di, Hafiz, Rumi, constantly brought a message of free thinking, of questioning everything. Even faith was only valued if it was subjected to question regularly. And it would be a great a wrong way or really missing the point if we focused on Khayyam as somebody who denigrates life, is pessimistic about human abilities, and is obsessed with wine, and it therefore is, just live this moment, drink your wine, and looking at his life, you can see that he is everything but that kind of a perception. So what I am suggesting is that the way we have looked at Khayyam, rather than being rooted in his own output, this image of the poet has, mathematician, philosopher, poet, is in a way resulted from the narrowness of our scholarship. And also in the entanglement of this conversation that happened as a result of the translation of his work into English in 19th century Victorian England, where these concepts were constantly argued about how much freedom, how much individuality, and suddenly Khayyam seemed like to be the answer to these questions. So a lot was packed into who Khayyam was, who I would argue he actually is not. Now, on May 18, this is a kind of a general background. And to get to more details, on May 18 in 1048, in the old neighborhood of Shadiakh, in the old city of Nishabur, a boy was born destined to be a major figure in science and philosophy by the time of his death in the same city in Nishabur in 1124. He was perfectly known, referred to for these two areas. Now, it took 2 more centuries before his poetic legacy was added to this impressive scientific legacy. And, again, you can do a whole chapter on what happened. Quatrains were often memorized. We have the concept of wandering quatrains, where there are quatrains that appear in different people's works. So by the time things begin to be sorted out a little bit, it takes about 2 centuries before we get the references to Khayyam the poet. Khayyam's father was an unlettered man, had never been in school, of very modest means, not rich at all, and very likely he was a convert from Zoroastrianism. There are stories about Khayyam. There's a story that the father realized that Khayyam has a deep interest in the Quran and is memorizing it as a kid. And so took him to Qazi Muhammad, who was a major religious authority And Ghazi Muhammad said to Khayyam, oh, you know all this stuff about the Quran and do you want to learn more about it? Khayyam said yes. And Ghazi Muhammad said, do you have any questions about it? He said, yes, sir. I'm wondering why God constantly says, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, which is in the name of God, the compassionate and merciful. And isn't this duality? I mean, isn't this two gods? Are there two gods or is there really one God? And Ghazi Muhammad said, I think I need to teach this kid, and accepted him into his classroom. Now, some of these could be stories we can never really completely prove, but it shows what people thought of him, which is, I think, equally important. Khayyam studied in Nishabur. He studied geometry, algebra, and astronomy, and in philosophy, he always considered himself a student of Ibn Sina or Avicenna. In fact, he referred to Avicenna as my master so often that some people assumed he had actually been in Avicenna's class, but we know that historically it's not possible for him because Avicenna was too far before him to be his direct teacher. But on the last day of his life, he actually was reading the Isharat of Avicenna. So it shows how he really considered that to be a very important contribution to human knowledge. Very likely, he was not a classmate of Khaja Nizam al-Mulk and Hassan al-Sabbah, the two other major figures, one a politician and the other one the leader of the Ismaili community. In Persian tradition, people have referred to the three of them as Zayar Dabistani, the three kids, the gang of three that went to school together, but we really don't have any reason to substantiate that. After finishing school in Nishabur, Khayyam went to Samarkand, and there he studied with a lot of people and wrote his treatise on algebra for a Ghazi Abu Tahir, who was very much a supporter of science. And the reason why I'm particularly pointing to this is because Ghazi Abu Tahir was instrumental with a friend he had called Shamsuddin to take Khayyam to the court of Sultan Jalaluddin Malik Shah Saljuqi, who then really embraced Khayyam and his learning, and in fact he commissioned the Jalali calendar, which Khayyam designed. Now, I'm going to tell you something that's going to really shock you. Scientists tell us that to this day, Khayyam's calendar is the most accurate calendar ever calculated by human beings. Now imagine the instruments he had at that time and the knowledge he had, and how do we explain this? I don't know, but you can look it up for yourself and see that this is a kind of among scientists quite well known. Now, it's no surprise that this person is being owned by everyone. Sufis say he's a Sufi. Because he, in a book he wrote about various people of various cultures and backgrounds, he liked Sufis. He talked about them and he said, I've read about a lot of people. His approach to life is a very good one. But many historians will tell you that it would be pushing it too far to actually claim that Khayyam was a Sufi. He was far too, I think, attached to the materiality of life. Things he could touch and feel and see and describe, and not really seeking the hidden meaning behind them, but what they were in the real everyday life. He's also, the Persian nationalists claim him as being a member of the Shu'ubiyyah, the early Persian kind of rebellion against Arab takeover. Again, we have no historical evidence whatsoever that he was there. Agnostic scientists say he was totally agnostic. I tell you, he's agnostic about everything. Like many scientists, he likes questions more than answers. I have a sister who has a PhD in pure mathematics. When I talk to her, the fascinating thing is I'm looking for answers, she's looking for questions. There's never, anything is ever to end. And I'm not surprised that a person of Khayyam's genius was questioning anything including his faith also. Has also been described as a self-indulgent hedonist given only to the pleasures of the moment. I do not think that we need to even address that. The kinds of scientific, accurate, hard-working legacy that he's left behind is just totally impossible. If you were a person who did not dedicate your life to working every day, every night, to do it. Now, I will argue today, you are free to challenge me on this, that he was a practicing Muslim actually, but not one with a very strong rational and scientific inclination with major existential questions. So he wanted to be a Muslim that constantly questions everything about the purpose of life, about what are we doing here, where's the beginning, where's the end, and all of these important questions. And he, just as we will see in a second, that in science, he never settled for prefabricated answers, even if it was Euclid or Archimedes who had given it. He would try for himself, and he did prove them wrong in some places. So in religion too, he was not ready for a prefabricated answer about where we're going to end. He wanted to continue to question and continue to move forward. And his philosophical writing in a Risale called Risale Kulliyat Wujud, the treatise on the basic principles, general principles of existence actually shows this very well. There he talks about the whole world emanating from God, the order that runs this world emanating from God as well, and so forth. So you can go to those. There are also other reasons. Many of you might not know that he was a friend of the major Persian poet Sanai, who's a major Sufi figure. And there is a reason why Khayyam was a respected kind of Muslim scholar, because at one point when Sanai was in town of Nishabur, his slave, 1,000 dinars got lost, and then Sanai left town, and his slave was arrested and tortured to confess to stealing it. And he said, "Oh, my master took the money." And of course, Sanai was totally distraught, me stealing money. And then he wrote this letter to Khayyam that, thanks to Professor Mojtaba Minawi, we actually have it published a few decades ago, in which he talks about Khayyam, about his great knowledge, and then he says, "Friend, save me. I'm not a thief. You know that I'm not a thief. Do something for me." And what Khayyam does is just one visit to the local judge of the religious authority, and that's it. Now, if Khayyam had a reputation for a wine-drinking, pleasure-seeking, anti-religious figure, he would have not had the weight to carry this kind of favor. Also, on his last day of life, when he was reading Isharat, at some point he closed the book, and we actually know on which page he closed it because he put a marker there. Then he called his friends, and they said, "Let's eat, Master." He said, "No, let's pray first and eat later." And they prayed, and these are his last words. He said, "Oh Lord, I know you as much as it is possible for me. Forgive me for my knowledge of you, as is my way of reaching you." So, in other words, he didn't believe that there was going to be a huge epiphany for any person to suddenly see God. It was the knowledge that they built step by step to get there. But I think that says a lot about who he was. The other things we know about him, he was a relentless truth seeker. He would read something 10 times, 15 times, as reported by his students, until he could get to something. He had a reputation for having a good memory. One time he found, apparently, according to the stories, a manuscript in Isfahan that he liked a lot, but they couldn't give it to him. He couldn't buy it. There was no other copies. he borrowed it and read it 7 times. And then when he got to Nishabur, he dictated a summary of it to the student. And the story tells us that the summary is a pretty amazing kind of core of the ideas in the book. Some of this could be a little bit exaggerated, as you can all see, but it says what people thought of him too. Again, he was somewhat of a recluse. He did not like to be in big parties. When he put his foot in his mouth, and bad things happened. One time, Abul-Ola asked him, "What do you think of the criticisms of Abul Barakat of Ibn Sina?" And that Abul-Ola guy was a big fan of Abul Barakat, who was a theologian. And Khayyam said, "I don't think he understands Ibn Sina, let alone criticize him." And that was the end of his relationship with Abul-Ola. Because he was very offended. And then he said, "Aren't you a scientist? Don't you think that everybody is entitled to their opinions?" And he said, "You're right," to his credit. And the story says that he hung his head in shame for his criticism. But just telling you what kind of a person he was. He wasn't interested in status, in politics, and even in wealth. He just wanted to be left alone to do his own research. Now, Khayyam as a scientist, I'm going to do maybe 5 or 6 minutes of that before delving into his poetry based on that. By far, the most favorite subject for Omar Khayyam was mathematics. And he was also interested deeply in the philosophy of mathematics. Fascinated by the mathematical order and where this order issues from. Why does the mathematical order correspond closely with the order that's dormant in nature? He wanted constantly to discover these things and to either see the overlap or separate them from each other. And one time he spoke, and I love this quote, he said, "To speak of wujud, existence, is to speak of order, which is the topic of mathematics." So in other words, he actually wanted to see the order in life, bring some order in life, and maybe find some answers to all the questions he had. Now, he contributed to many different fields, and not much of it is known outside a very close, specialized community of scientists. And here, I would wholeheartedly recommend to you that in one of these Khayyam days, we just do Khayyam the scientist. Just look at what he's done for different fields, or at least a part of it. In theory of numbers, he contributed to the conversation so dramatically that they now say it was his innovation to place irrational quantities and numbers on the same operation skills. And don't ask me to explain some of these methods. and he's known as having created, therefore, a revolution in the doctrine of numbers. As you will see, we will talk about revolution again and again. The Khayyam Karaji-Pascal triangle. Some of you may have heard that. Now, in arithmetic, there is the field of calculus of probability, and also the concept of arithmetical triangle. The best example is known in the West still as the Pascal triangle. The Pascal triangle is a triangle that consists of rows of numbers that all begin and end with 1. So there are just ones around this. Other numbers in the triangle may be obtained by adding together the 2 numbers on either side above for the row below. There are any mathematicians here, I'm sure they know that much better than I do. Now, it is used for calculating probabilities. It was known, not to Pascal, just before Pascal, somewhat in China, and somewhat in India, and absolutely perfectly in Persia. It actually was known to the master mathematician of Khayyam, known Karaji as Karaji, and Karaji taught that to Khayyam, and Khayyam improved it. So at some point recently, I think maybe a decade ago, they decided to call this triangle, the Chayyam-Pascal triangle. But, you know, I don't think that it is really that important to just argue over names, but sometimes names mean a lot. And they do teach us what the world knew in the 11th century, not in the 17th century. Also in physics, he has a treatise that has a really funny and interesting name. He said it's called On the Deception of Knowing the Two Quantities of Gold and Silver in a Compound Made of the Two. Now, this is about Archimedes' idea of taking something underwater and weighing it there, taking it out of water, and all of that. And what is important is that in doing this, he criticizes the principles of Archimedes and actually replaces them with very good explanation. He was often irritated that these big masters didn't try to explain why they did very well because they thought everybody's going to accept it. So he would go thoroughly in there and redo it. And not only that, he acknowledged his two masters in physics, Abdurrahman Khazani and Mansur Neyrizi, who were also major figures in this area. And in physics, people know this, but outside physics, they don't. Now, my favorite is what he did to Hendeseye Eqlidosi, the Euclidean geometry. Now, that's a crown of Khayyam's contribution to science, and in the criticism to begin with, because he dared to question Euclid. This figure, this giant figure that whose shadow kind of covered everything, and not only he questioned it, he criticized it, and he created something by adding, I'm going to tell you in a second, that became then known as a branch of geometry as non-Euclidean geometry. It should be Khayyamian geometry, not non-Euclidean geometry, because that's what he did. Now what he did, he discussed the fifth postulate of Euclid, Asle Panjom Eqlidos, which is about parallel lines. And he criticized Euclid for not discussing the central topics of geometry and focusing instead on trivial aspects of it. And then to remedy that, he presented 8 axioms that he added to that particular principle. Now, a lot more could be said about his contribution to science, but the reason why I'm saying this here is I think these kinds of approaches to learning are completely central to who he was as a poet. Now, Omar Khayyam's contemporaries did not really refer to him as a poet. In fact, the letter that Sanai writes to him addresses him about everything but doesn't call him a poet. It could be because quatrains weren't considered to be important enough genre of poetry. It consisted of 4 short lines. It could be because he never put together a divan. It could be that he just wrote for himself and never really spoke about it. But he was certainly known enough for readers of poetry to memorize them and then begin to add their contributions in his name. So why would you go to attribute your work to someone to get fame unless that person has the poetic weight to kind of give your work the kind of recognition that it does. Now, over time, the number of quatrains which had initially been viewed in the range of 100 to 120 actually proliferated to over 1,000 quatrains. So one of the big tasks of critics has always been how to separate them, which one is really his. And you know, one of the great scholars of Khayyam, Elbel Satin, says, I was talking to an Iranian Persian lover of Khayyam poetry, and I said, are these really Khayyams? He said, whoever wrote these is Khayyam for me. So that's a very interesting approach. It has a combination of many different things that brings them, makes them popular to people. There are people like Arthur Christensen, a scholar in Britain, who said 121 of them authentic. Hidayat, Sadiq Hidayat, who was a lover of Khayyam, said 142 of them are authentic. It just isn't really that important. But by the time Professor Mujtaba Minovi in early 20th century wrote, he identified 1,500 books and articles written about Khayyam in various languages. Also, up to the point where I was writing and looking around, there are already 32 English translations, 16 French translations, 12 German translations, 11 Urdu translations, and 8 Arabic translations. So just to give you a kind of a sense of how he was received. Now, I don't think that we should worry that much about which ones of them are authentic. It depends a lot on us, the way we understand them and are ready to accept or reject them. In the West, and let me just say this also very briefly, Khayyam was known in Iran through manuscripts mostly to people loved poetry so much that they would know it by heart, maybe not so much a topic of a major poet as Sadi or Hafiz, but he was certainly quoted. But when it was translated into English by Fitzgerald, it caused a uproar in England, because they presented him as this wine lover, this rule breaker, and so very much he got entangled. To Fitzgerald, Khayyam was the embodiment of Oriental wisdom and also Oriental sexuality, all these fantasies that the British had about the Orient, the imaginary Orient. So Khayyam suddenly became that. When I started thinking about what I would like to tell you about Khayyam besides this kind of scientific stuff, I thought, why explore his relationship with God? Talk about wine again? It's really boring. It's really doesn't say so much meaning. And besides, his scientific work shows that he's not a wine drinker. Now, I had begun to pay attention and really be interested in what has become known as eco-criticism, and what is a literary role in understanding our ecology, our environment. And then I thought, well, who better than Khayyam for thinking of this environment inwardly and outwardly, objectively as a scientist, and subjectively as a poet. And stereotypically, presentations of literature in ecology are that literature happens behind closed doors. The writers are not interested in what really happens outside. Boyle, who's a major writer in the area, says writing and reading are acts that are usually performed indoors. Besides, writing needs its own paraphernalia, and you take the stuff there. And then I thought, well, maybe not Khayyam. Because first he was an astronomer, he was always looking up there. He was a physicist, he was very aware of the world around him. And he therefore really was fascinated with what we think is away from literature. Could a person who has not stared at the heavens, the vastness of the heavens, and looked at his own size and the environment and his relationship, write this? In چرخ فلک که ما در او حیرانیم، فانوس خیال از او مثال دانیم. خورشید چراغ دان عالم فانوس، ما چون صوری کاندر آن حیران. Compared to the turning wheel of the heavens, of which we know little, the lantern of our imagination is but a small example. The real lamp is the sun, the world embracing it like a shade. We are turning images, looking at it hard, to understand. The same is true of another concept. In other words, Khayyam is an exception there, and it's true of the concept in environmentalism that says the inanimate world is not important to literature, or the natural world is not. One of these environmentalists who writes for literature, he says, "I've never had a tree, a valley, or a mountain thank me for preserving it." So they have no personality. I'm doing it for us, saving the planet for us. For Khayyam, the planet speaks to him all the time. ابر آمد و باز بر سر سبزه گریست. So the cloud comes above the meadows and cries on it. چون ابر به نوروز رخ لاله بشست. The spring comes and washes the face of tulips in the spring. And also, another criticism of the approach of plays or stories to the environment is that they use the word setting. They say, well, this is the story, these are the people, this is the setting. So the setting is not important. That's the criticism that environmentalists or eco-critics bring to literature. Well, I'm of the mind that this doesn't apply to Khayyam at all. این کوزه چو من عاشق زاری بوده است، در بند سر زلف نگاری بوده است. این دسته که بر گردن او میبینی دستی است که بر گردن یاری بوده است. He's looking at a jar, the wine jar, or water, I don't know, wine jar is usually what we think. This wine jar has been as lovesick as I, caught in the captive curls of a beloved. This handle you see built into its upper torso, it is a hand that has embraced a loved one. Now, you have to bring, of course, the cultural context into the conversation, because the jar holds the wine talks of intoxication and love, but also people who die and are buried, are given to the earth. So they're not within a wooden structure, they're given to the earth. So he sees that continuity between the body and the earth, like this jug is made, this earth jug is therefore a part of me, and it is not separated from me as the inanimate objects are. And it feels the pain of love and separation. Khayyam also often showed very impatient with inexplicable aspects of existence. And as a scientist, of course, accustomed to solving problems, he was just like, why can I not find this? Why can I not do this? Not because he considered it worthless and he wanted to go into his room and drink more wine. این بحر وجود آمده بیرون ز نهفت. این بحر وجود آمده بیرون ز نهفت. کس نیست که این گوهر تحقیق بسفت. هر کس سخنی از سر سودا گفتند زان روی که هست کس نمی‌داند گفت. He says, if you don't know, just say I don't know. Don't make up stories about where our beginning and where our ends were. The sea of existence has come out of an unseen world. There is not a soul that knows how this really works. Everyone has an explanation without much depth. For the way things really are, nobody knows. And then he's even more puzzled about what happens to us. If we are big thinkers, if we are beautiful, if we have love, why do we die? Where does it all end? He's an artist and he's a scientist. When he creates something, he wants to protect it. So why did the creator par excellence did not protect us from death? جامی است که عقل آفرین میزندش، صد بوسه ز مهر بر جبین میزندش. این کوزه‌گر دهر چنین جام لطیف میسازد و باز بر زمین میزند. There is a wine cup so fine that wisdom praises its perfection. Human beings are this wine cup. Body, the cup, wine, the soul. There is a wine cup so fine that wisdom praises its perfection and showers its gentle face with kisses of admiration. Then there is this potter, which is the cruelty of time. In Kuzagarada. This potter, which is the cruelty of time, he first makes the cup, then throws it to shatter into pieces. So this is something that he was very sensitive to. Again, he loves this environment. This is, sometimes environmentalists complain that poets think of the earth as a shoddy way station. That's not this to him. He's enjoying the freshness of the meadows all the time, and he wishes he could come back to it. ای کاش که جای آرمیدن بودی یا این ره دور را رسیدن بودی. ای کاش که جای آرمیدن بودی یا این ره دور را رسیدن بودی. کاش از پی 100,000 سال از دل خاک چون سبزه امید بردمیدن. Would it that this world would be a place of rest, or this long journey would end in some reachable place? Would it that after 1,000 years from the depths of the earth one could hope to grow again like a simple blade of grass? Now, this imaginary return from death, which cannot materialize, of course, because human beings cannot turn themselves into a blade of grass, but they can recognize and honor the simplicity of the connection that they have with this world around them. And he keeps giving very, very tangible examples. یک قطره آب بود و با دریا شد. یک ذره خاک و با زمین یک جا شد. آمد شدن تو اندر این عالم چیست؟ آمد مگسی پرید و را پیدا. You have to see your smallness. The greatness of this existence, this environment you are in that nurtures you, that has you, but also makes you disappear. He was a drop of water, humanity, that returned to the sea. A speck of dust that became one with the earth. You can look at your coming to the world and leaving as being here an instant and be gone. The plight of being. Now, I'm going to end pretty soon here, and I would like to put an emphasis again on the connectivity. When you're reading him, he's one with his environment, whether it's the bee, the fly, the sea, and that they also have the kind of questioning souls that we have, and that we have to respect. هر سبزه که بر کنار جویی رسته است، گویی ز لب فرشته خویی رسته است. پا بر سر سبزه تا به خاری ننه، کان سبزه ز خاک لاله روی رسته است. Every blade of grass growing on the edge of the stream has grown as if carrying the beauty of an angelic face. Do not ever trample the grass as if it was worthless. It has grown from the earth where a beauty was laid to rest. So, in other words, when we talk about how we human beings are short-sighted by looking at our environment as if we were self-contained sacks and we were not connected with them, not with Omar Khayyam. In his own kind of eerie and sometimes very critical ways, he connects us not only to each other and to the environment, but even to non-being. The concept that we are sandwiched between non-existence and God knows where we are going. Okay, so بستر خاک خفتگان میبینم، در زیر زمین نهفتگان میبینم، چندان که به صحرای عدم می‌نگرم ناآمدگان و رفتگان می‌بینم. And Corey, if you do Persian, you can read and understand this in your next year. I promise you that. And you know, sometimes when I taught Omar Khayyam in one class, and there was this Palestinian student who was a poet himself, and we started reading it in Persian, and he suddenly held his head and he said, you know, we weren't supposed to speak English. And he said, that's why. And I said, Muhammad, I said, what are you talking about? Why are you speaking English? He said, that's why. I've always written in Arabic and English. It didn't make sense. Now I know why. So, on the face of the earth are those fast asleep. I see those fast asleep. Beneath the earth, the ones whom we can no longer see. Then I look at the vast field of non-existence. There I see those who are gone and those who are not here yet. And I'm going to end with a concept of arriving in the world. And I'm actually being critical of environmentalists, but let me quote a great environmentalist, Shepherd, who actually is himself very poetic, and he talks about our arriving in the world. And it kind of stayed with me when I read it first. He says, man, humanity, did not arrive in the world as though disembarking from a train in a city. He continues to arrive, somewhat like the birth of art, passing through many stations, none of which is ever wholly left behind. And if you think about kind of encounter with life, what passes is never completely gone. And that arriving again and again is an enormously optimistic way of looking at life. We can arrive again and we can make it a happy place. گر یک نفست ز زندگانی گذرد مگذار که جز به شادمانی گذرد. هشدار که سرمایه سودای جهان عمر است چنان کش گذرانی می‌گذرد. And this is Omar Khayyam saying the same thing. This is your capital. You're coming. Arrive again. Even a moment as short as taking a breath do not pass except in utter bliss and joy. Do not forget that the only capital you have in hand is your life. It will give you what you spend it for. And let me just go back to Khayyam, the scientist, and end with the Rubai, which shows that ultimately geometry was his life. It was his love, you know. And when he really wanted to make us understand, his metaphors were mathematical. در دایره‌ای که آمد و رفتن ماست آن را نه بدایت نه نهایت پیداست کس می نزند دمی در این معنی راست که این آمدن از کجا و رفتن. We are in the circle of being, arriving again and again and again without knowing where was the arrival station and where we would get out, the destination. The circle that is our coming and our going both. But just think about this. The circle is our coming and our going both. Has neither a beginning nor a termination. No one speaks the truth regarding a simple matter. Where is the starting point and where is the destination?